It's Steven from KR Motorsports. We are officially on day 2 of the Honda Beat here. So just a quick recap. Yesterday we had the transmission harness hooked up. So we got the motor to crank. We got the EMU kind of wired up just to test for crank sensor, and we couldn't get it. So the crank sensor is wired one of two ways. It's a Hall effect sensor. So it's either 12 volt and shielded ground, or just ground, excuse me. And then the other way is 5 volt and sensor ground. So the Honda stuff wants 12 volt and ground, what they call the logic ground. And then the ECU master stuff wants 5 volt and sensor ground. I wired it both ways. I wired it first Honda style, and we got nothing on the O-scope. So then I switched it to the EMU style with the pull-up, with and without a pull-up. And you know, if you guys need an explanation on a pull-up, we can talk about that. But with and without pull-ups, nothing. We got nothing on it at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to... It's hard to see. Let's see if we can get this focused. There we go. So that sensor right there that's in between the frame rail is the crank sensor. So we're going to pull that guy out. And what we're going to do first is we're going to check continuity from end to end. So according to what I can surmise anyways, is that the 3 wires should run directly to the ECU with nothing in between it. So I'm going to check that today. If we have good continuity, we're going to test the sensor. So what we're going to do to test the sensor is basically to pull it out and then put it, like, move it literally in front of a wrench or anything metal, really, anything that's steel. If it picks it up in the O-scope, then we know that the sensor is good. Now, failing if the sensor is bad, I'm going to try to find one that will work as a US replacement. However, if we can't, it is on a standalone. It doesn't really care what sensor goes in it. So realistically, if we can find one that's going to bolt in, maybe change a connector or something, we should be able to get that to work. So here we go. Well, here's a fun one, guys. The sensor is out. Let's see if we can focus on this. Sensor is unbolted, but if you look, can't fully remove it because the frame rail's in the way. So we are going to have to figure this one out. By the way things look, though, in order to get it out, we're probably going to have to drop this motor mount somehow. There's 2 bolts underneath that would drop it, but the problem is that the frame rail is actually pretty long. So I don't know how far we have to drop this motor to get this out, but I'm going to wiggle with this from underneath and hope for the best. So there's that. Alright, so I did this all off screen. There's 3 wires here. Like I said, they all go to 3 pins: power, ground, and signal. We checked it all here. So basically we have this, it runs to this side of the harness. From here we've got our jumper into the EMU, and we've got continuity. So unfortunately, with that being said, it looks like we're gonna have to try to find a sensor that has this connector here. So we'll figure that out and we'll go from there. Here we are, 2 o'clock, 2:40 or something like that, and we finally got the sensor out. Bam, right there. So we're gonna test it here in a minute. It took a lot to get it out. You got to take this mount out. We had to take the trans mount out and then threw a breaker bar on it while prying on it to get it out. But it is out. So what we're going to do now is we're going to plug this back into the harness, power up the ECU, and what I'm going to do is basically take a wrench and do this number here. And then if it shows on the O-scope, we know that we have a problem. So one thing that I did notice on this sensor already is that it almost looks like it was touching at one point in time, and that might have been the cause, but we don't really know for a fact. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug this in, power up the ECU, and then wave the wrench in front of it. And then if we get something on the O-scope, then we know the sensor's good. And if we don't, then we know the sensor's bad. So update in a sec. One other thing before I forget, I was looking online, and there's a part number on this here. You can find this sensor online on Amazon. but they don't say what it's actually for. So I was looking on the local auto parts store's website, O'Reilly's is who I like to use, and I was looking at this sensor, and obviously they don't give you dimensions, but man, I swore this was it right here, guys. Like, I saw the pins, and I saw the angle, and I was like, sweet, this will work. This is, by the way, for a 2009 Civic Si, and the reason why this doesn't work, besides the connector size difference, there's also a length difference here. So 2009 Si will not work. So back to the drawing board on that. Okay, so basically I have the sensor hooked up down here. I've verified that we've got power and ground where it's supposed to. We've got signal where we got to. So basically right now we have the pull-up enabled on a Hall sensor setup, right? So this right here in red is no sync. So if it starts to see signal, it'll try to synchronize. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna record this, and I'm gonna grab our sweet wrench here, and we're gonna wave it in front of the sensor and see if we get anything. So we got nothing. All right, so there's a good chance that the sensor is no good. At this point, I can try to swap the pins around for power and ground and see if that changes anything, but there's a probably good chance that this is no good. So we'll try that, and we'll try moving pins around and see what we get. All right, guys, end of day 2. Unfortunately, nothing to really talk about. Was able to get the sensor out. I've been trying to find a sensor all day. So I was actually plugging in the factory sensor, and I had it sitting on the transmission, and I was looking down and I noticed that this had actually synced, and you can see here that it gave, obviously this RPM is erroneous, right? It's definitely not right. But the really weird thing is that I had just had the sensor sitting in one spot, and so I left it there and I pulled up the scope and I did a quick scope. Unfortunately, I didn't know this, but when you do a second scope, it actually erases. So unfortunately I didn't see it. But the thing about it is that the sensor is just sitting on the transmission. So the magnet inside is attracted to something, but it should not be moving. It would have seen basically one large tooth. But looking at the scope data when I did it, you could see that it was like wiggling. So that means that there's something, the sensor for sure is bad. Like, I don't know whether I just hit it and then it just started working temporarily, made like an internal connection temporarily, but the sensor is definitely bad. Unfortunately here, Inker found the sensor this morning, but it's not going to be here till like next week. So the thing is this is where we have the problem. The problem is that if the sensor shows up next week, we still don't even know if we can change to get the trigger data to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab I grabbed a different sensor. This came from the auto parts store. I actually had one of my guys run out to the junkyard to grab this connector, but this is for like some Dodge or something that was pretty, let me turn on the light real quick. So if you look here, the mounting position's pretty close. It's not like on the money, but it's pretty close. But where it falls short at is the actual length. So if let me see here. If you line it up, there we go. So if the base is like the exact same, you see that it falls short. So that's not going to work. I was using this to basically test my wiring though, and for some reason it's also not working. So I don't know. I mean, it is a auto parts store sensor. It could be dead out of the box. I don't know, but technically this should just be working. So I looked at the wire at the Dodge and that we pulled the connector out of, and I followed its diagram to the T, and this is actually a 5-volt sensor, which is why I picked it, and it also is still not working. So I'm not really sure what on earth is going on. I don't know if maybe the harness here is bad. The thing is that on this harness side, I've checked this. I can't tell you how many times I've checked this, and I get continuity here. What I did not do, thinking about it now, is I should have ohmed it out to check for resistance, but unfortunately it's no dice here so far, so no good news, unfortunately. So we'll give it a shot tomorrow. There's not much else I can do today, so I guess we'll hang it up and then give it another shot. So end of day 2, no real dice here. So hopefully tomorrow we get better luck.